Sahana Votu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May our study be cooperative and done with great enthusiasm. May it give us strength. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So the theme tonight is Holy Week. And I just thought a few moments ago that some people might have thought it was Holy, H-O-L-I, because there's been a spring festival, of course. And the spring festival is celebrated in India, and also for the Gaudiya Vaishnavites, also the celebration of the birth of Sri Chaitanya. And but these are linked because essentially the week that began on Sunday last and culminates on Sunday, Monday of next week is essentially to do with the spring festival. And spring represents to us a new birth, a new opportunity. And when we're all immersed in this COVID-19 situation, we require some kind of upliftment. But we don't have to look very far. From my window or from our window here at the ashram, it doesn't take much imagination because we look out a window, and a few days back, there was a tree just with a few buds on. In the winter, it was bare. And now it is a huge, glorious display of white. Almost overnight. So we can see how nature responds. Daffodils are out, tulips are out. Many different kinds of flowers in Europe are out. And nature has decided to make these spring flowers and into summer all yellow, all bright, all cheery. So by carefully observing nature, we can see how wonderfully everything is devised and designed. And this wonderful spring festival, we should certainly celebrate with great joy, even if we don't have the opportunity to do it outwardly, at least we can do it inwardly. The term Easter is derived from the goddess Ustra, a Celtic goddess of fertility. And this name was adopted because the great inspiration, foundation of Christianity itself, Yeshua or Jesus, was put on the cross, as we all know, but rose again on a Sunday, just like the sun's rise. And for that reason, Christians from there on celebrated that day as a great celebratory day, a renewal, like the rising sun, like the spring flowers, like the renewal that we have, the spirit of renewal when we observe all these optimistic things. And so it is symbolized by eggs, because eggs represent new birth, new life. But where does this story begin? So the title of this talk is Holy Week, and that means that our story begins. Actually, our story begins a long way back at the beginning of a preparation for this particular period. We have to understand that this period is the most sacred in Christendom. And I also decided to do this because one of our devotees said, can you not talk about Christ? Can you not give us some kind of teaching or information or insight into the life of Christ? And so I said, all right, let me do it. And this is an opportune moment to do it. It begins this preparatory period, what we call Lent, a time where we make a preparation, and all of us in spiritual life have to go through some period of tapasya. Now, the English translation of tapasya as austerity is a little misleading, because it sounds very, very difficult. It sounds like it is an unpleasant thing to do. It sounds like a struggle, but it need not be like that at all, because the amount of struggle is commensurate with our attachment to this world and our evaluation of this world as a reality. Our philosophy tells us that when we look at it closely, our science also tells us when we look at it closely, we find it is not as solid as we thought it was. Subject to the network of space and time, when you look at it carefully, we are deluded into thinking that it is a continuum. Just to state it is not adequate enough. We have to take up some practice so that we can understand it. And the principal practice will be detachment. Detachment doesn't mean running away, going into a cave. Detachment simply means that we don't value or evaluate the world as we previously did. And we strengthen our conviction of the transient nature of this world. We do it systematically, step by step, day by day, minute by minute, second by second, because we have the capacity to think. And thought is a flow, a flowing current that arrives at our substation, available for our use. And this thought can travel faster than the speed of light. And using this thought, we can then develop and condense the world that we like in front of us, the world that we want. And so for that reason, Jesus said, seek ye first this kingdom of heaven, other things will be added unto thee. You'll be looked after completely. Why not? If you want to get any gain in this world, going to a small subsidiary officer, a clerical administrator would not do. You go to the very top. Why not go to the king and the king of kings? So that approach will work. And of course, spiritual life is often of that petition kind. Please give me something. Not a bad beginning, but not a good ending. We should take this in a way that if we require our needs, just as if we have a parent, if we have a mother or father and we have some need, we'll put on the trouser or the dress and say, please, won't you give me this? And if it's a reasonable request, any loving parent will do it. But to do it perpetually, ad nauseum, ad infinitum, will not be the approach that we take in the Vedanta. Because there's a more profound goal in mind. There's a deeper goal that we have. There's a deeper purpose in life. And that purpose is described in the Vedanta as freedom. But in Christianity, it's described in other terms. Jesus described it as the kingdom of heaven. And where is that kingdom of heaven? It's within you. Of a truth I tell you, the kingdom is not here or there. Lo, of a truth I tell you, the kingdom of heaven is within you, or at least in your midst. It is here, it is now. So such a messenger came, and we can take him according to any tradition we like, either as a prophet, or as an incarnation, or we can take him as a special figure, a Messiah, an anointed one in the Jewish context. Any one of these terms, I don't think it really matters. And the reason why I say I don't think it really matters is that when you pin exclusiveness on this entity, you're now going against what he taught. His whole teaching can be summarized as a Sermon on the Mount. And in Swami Vivekananda's just summarized words in his talk, Christ the Messenger, and the Christ we adore, he would have said, supposing that you didn't think that Christ was any special entity, that the requirement wasn't to follow him personally, but to follow his teachings, what would that Christ say? Very well, my child, go your way, and then full of blessings. Because where's the requirement to depend on one entity or one form alone, first of all, it doesn't make much sense. I always remember one of the great presidents of the Ramakrishna Martin Mission, and he was Swami Ranganatananda, saying to me in a little bit of fun, he says, I feel sorry for the Christians. I say, why is that, Maharaj? He said, because, you see, their God can only have one son, ours can have as many as he likes. And I know that's a little bit irreverent for some and will touch the theological nerves of some Christians. But nevertheless, we have to understand that from the Vedantic point of view, this whole world is like a great ocean, and from time to time, huge, vast waves come. It doesn't matter what you call them, and leave their mark for 2, 3, 4,000 years. So what was the transformation that this Yeshua, this Jesus, this the Anointed One, Christ, what did he leave? Well, of course, we know Christianity was there, and Christianity is there. And millions of Christian adherents are very specially dedicating their thoughts, their prayers, and their life in this particular week. Last Sunday was called Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday. Can you imagine now Jesus coming from the Northern Territories, coming from Nazareth? And already that area is known for its troublesome history. It is full of rebels. But it is also the avenue by which the Greco-Roman world enters. And so the area that Jesus came from would have been rich in experience. And he's coming and he's going into Jerusalem essentially to attend the Passover. This Jewish feast of Pasch celebrates the exodus of the Jewish people from their exile from the Holy Land, the land of their great Abrahamic establishment, because they were, according to the story, enslaved in Egypt. And whether you believe historically this story or not, the fact of the matter is it is profoundly symbolic. We are all under apparent slavery, and our urge is freedom. To get out of the slavery is the whole goal, according to the Vedanta. So, through many adventures, 40 years going toward what is the goal, the land of milk and honey, and it has to be with a great deal of faith, with a light leading you forward. Moses was supposed to tap the rock, and water should have gushed out, but he paid for it. He never visited the land of milk and honey. He saw it from a distance, because he tapped it not once, but he tapped it twice, telling us the dangers of doubt, lack of faith. In order to get our freedom, the first requirement is to get up from where we are, to be prepared to change and move, to go on a pilgrimage, to get out of our exile and go back home. It's not that we discovered a new land. This is our old land, and it is the land of bliss, immortalized as a land of milk and honey. And so we persist. Imagine now wandering in the desert. Desert means the dry wasteland of this life that really doesn't offer much pleasure. It seems to, but it only offers us mirages. And when we wake up and with a central purpose in mind and with perseverance and determination, we head toward that land, and generations follow it. What a wonderful story this Exodus is. And why is it the Passover? Is because in the land of Egypt, people of the land of Israel were inspired that an angel will come and mark every door, and those doors will be saved from any of the plagues that were invaded Egypt. And there were strict instructions exactly what to eat on that day, what to pack, and then to move out. And so this is a very key celebration in Judaism. And Jesus was a Jew. And so he was heading actually for Jerusalem via Bethany. Bethany, about 3 kilometers or so away from Jerusalem. And he and his disciples would have spent some time in the Mount of Olives, a series of mountains, approximately, say, 2,000 feet or so high, and 3 peaks being there, but a very ancient site for the people of Judea, and one of the most ancient cemeteries in the world, sacred to the Jewish people, even to today. Mount of Olives was one of the peaks, described because it was where many, many olive trees grew. And archaeologists, botanists have examined the trees and found them to be extremely ancient, probably over 1,000 years old, but with the roots, the original roots that are inferred from these trees going way, way back, maybe to the time of Jesus and more. And there, a Garden of Gethsemane at the bottom of it was a favorite haunt for these disciples on their way to Jerusalem. What was the purpose of the Jerusalem visit? Of course, like every other pilgrim, it was to visit for the Passover, this feast that is celebrated, centered around the Jerusalem temple that had been built for the second time. Solomon originally built it, and then it was destroyed. And it was Cyrus the great Persian king, who exhorted a rebuilding of it. And for this reason, Cyrus himself was called Messiah. This term Messiah refers to a special anointed king or priest. And it was associated, and is still associated today in Judaism, with somebody who will rescue the people, who create a world, not just a region, a world of peace, a world of happiness, a world where there is no war, and a place where God will come in a kind of end of world days scenario, possibly, and will reestablish the kingdom of the Jews, of the Jewish people, and rescue them. And Jesus lived in a time of Roman occupation and domination. Rome was the imperial power of its day. It controlled most of the Mediterranean regions, and it was a very powerful adversary. And we can understand what resentment the Jewish people would have had for these foreign Gentiles, as they called them, because they were the chosen people. They were the people who were led by Abraham, and they were the people who were led out of exile by God, and they were the people who made a contract with their God, even though the God may have started off as a tribal concept, a tribal leader, and was supreme because in their history, it was that God that led them into favorable circumstances. And when things were not favorable, they realized it was their own fault. No fatalism there, just as in Vedanta, no fatalism exists. I am the cause of my own joy and my own suffering. It is all on me. It is the way I think. And so if I think in a pure way, then purity comes to me. If I think in terms of strength and beauty and goodness and love, all that comes to me. And as with all of these incarnations, they arrive at a time where a Dharma is there from age to age. Such an entity, such a Messiah will come. And so in Jesus' time, we see, first of all, the decline of the Jewish religion, because apart from anything else, they were under Roman occupation. And naturally, we're in a kind of feeling of depression, as anybody would in their enslavement. Just as they were enslaved when they were in Egypt, they are now enslaved to the Roman people. And so the Romans understood that this feast of Passover was a very dangerous period of time. And the temple wasn't just a temple, it was also a center of commerce. Commerce and industry was centered around it. And not only that, but the Romans understanding the importance to the Jewish people of this temple, and that any sacrilege in the temple would create a huge riot, as it had previously done under this Pontius Pilate, the governor. The part of the table, the corner of the temple was in fact a fortress, a Roman garrison. And naturally they would have been acutely aware, with all these thousands of people coming into this one central point, Jerusalem, into this temple, and mulling around the garrison. Firstly, they would be prepared at any sign of rioting. And they were particularly on the lookout for troublemakers of any type, but they were particularly on the lookout for revolutionaries. And as soon as somebody says there's a Messiah, that means they are an anointed one, equivalent to a king. And the only king in those days is Caesar. And so Jesus ultimately gets arrested. He gets arrested by the Romans. Now, of course, the story goes a little differently from that, and we'll trace it. But Jesus comes into this Jerusalem in order to fulfill a prophecy by Zechariah. He sends his followers, his disciples. He says, go to a certain place, there you'll find a man, and you can request that I should have a colt, that is, small donkey. And if he asks about it, my master requested it, and he'll return it. And the main purpose was to enter, make a majestic entering into Jerusalem. And so the donkey came along and was clothed with cloaks, and the path that the donkey trod on was also layered with coats. Coats and palms. Palms were taken from date palm trees that were prolific around the area, and from olive branches also. And all of that was laid out, welcoming this Messiah. You can imagine how delicate the situation is now, because we are told, according to the gospel accounts, that all the citizens there, everybody there who was present, were shouting, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. They were greeting this entity on the donkey, who came in a symbol of humility and referenced by the prophet Zechariah. And there he comes in, and you can see how tense the situation must have been. And the Romans looking at this, because Caesar is the only king. Somebody who's declaring themselves as a king, that would be extremely dangerous. And we don't exactly know what happened. But we are told, and we're not sure if this is in sequence, that Jesus went to the temple and it was evening. And then he may have left with his disciples back to Bethany, or he may have stayed on in the temple. In any event, there is one instance which is clear. He enters into the temple courtyard, the center of commerce and industry, and upsets all the tables. And this is understood to be a purification of the temple. Now, with all of these things, I would like to try and see what is the deeper spiritual significance of this. Firstly, Katha Upanishad tells us that this body is an 11-gated city. There's 7 gates in the head, 1 in the navel, and then the organs of procreation, evacuation, and then the top of the head, the Brahmarandra, the royal entrance. And the royal king, we can imagine, this royal king is coming through the royal entrance. And inside, of course, the center of Jerusalem, the reason why it's there, is this great temple, built laboriously over many, many years. Magnificent structure, one of the great magnificent structures of the whole region. And it was designed in courtyards. And when we look at the human body and look in a meditative way, we are actually going inward, and we are replicating a pilgrimage around the various courtyards from the outside to the inside. And in many temples, for example, in South India, that is the architectural layout of the temple. You don't go straight into the garbha, the womb, or the Holy of Holies. You go round, you circumambulate, and the outer courtyard and even the outer decorations will symbolize the physical body and physical and material concerns. And we leave those behind and we go inward to more subtle areas. We go into the subtle area of the energy, subtle area of the mind and the intellect, and finally the bliss. And therein we find the symbol, if you like, the very heart of everything. And in the 11-gated city of the Kathopanishad, in the very center, that very emperor, if you will, is unborn, undying, and his consciousness is unflickering. So that is the scenario that we have. And we can imagine now this, because the whole of this week is meditative. And so in this meditative way, we can go along in this Holy Week from the very start and see what that means and the great joy we can experience. But it's also called Passion Sunday because in there is the pathos of things to come. We know that this great controversy of entering into this Jerusalem will have a bad ending, so to speak. So let us see if that happens. And then, of course, the whole week is there. The Monday is there. Today is the Tuesday. And each day has a particular significance because on the Monday, there's a famous event that happens. And Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, around that area, he looks at a fig tree and he sees, of course, its figs are not in season. And he curses the fig tree. And then, of course, on the way back, the following day, actually, his disciple Peter notices it and remembers how it was cursed because it didn't bear any fruit. When we don't bear good fruit, then it is displeasing in the course of spiritual life. But he questions Jesus on this and says, Jesus makes a remarkable statement. He says, no, greater things than this can you do. If you say to that hill, please move, it will move. And then he gives a statement of faith. He gives us a lifelong key about the mechanism of positive thinking. He says, believe that it is already accomplished. It already happened, and it'll be so. You can ask for anything, it'll be so. So these were some valuable lessons he was teaching. And then, of course, on that same day, it is said that he cleansed the temple. That is, we all have to cleanse our own temple. We have to cleanse it externally, but we have to cleanse the internal aspect of it, the external courtyard of our own inner dimension, our own Holy of Holies, otherwise called the mind, God's sitting room. And we have to clean it by meditation. Meditation, japa, prayer, we have to clean it. And so Tuesday comes along and Jesus is predicting his own death. Actually, he predicted it 3 times. On the first occasion, his apostles didn't really pay much attention to it. On the second, they almost blocked their ears. But he's predicting in the language of Son of Man. Now, this Son of Man is a phrase which is often disputed, and only Jesus uses it about himself. It's used in the Christian texts of Gospels some over 80 times, and we find it mainly in Zechariah. We find it throughout the Jewish texts about 100 times or so, but mainly in this book of Zechariah, and mainly therefore in connection with this entity that is a Messiah, one who is anointed one who will come especially. But he's predicting his own death. He's saying people will come, they will seize me, they will beat me, they will crucify me, things like that. 3 times he's predicting it. And in amongst that, he's challenging his most dear follower, Petros, Simon Peter. And he's saying, of course you say I'm this and you're saying that, and you say you'll follow me to the end of the days and so on and so forth. But I can tell you now that before the cock crows 3 times, in other words, when the cock crows twice, you will deny that you even know me. And so it was. And then tomorrow, which is Wednesday, we think about the betrayal of Judas. So let us think in a meditative way, go back again and say, we deny the existence of our own spiritual nature. Sometimes we think that God is a thing or something, some kind of object that we can keep in the cupboard and bring him out whenever we require. Or maybe we leave him there and he can come out on a Sunday, but otherwise we put him back in. And then we make this great division between spiritual and secular life. And when that happens, of course, it means our religion is only superficial. The whole message of Jesus was about renunciation. And so religion really starts with that. Religion is realization, says Swami Vivekananda. And the whole of religion in terms of practice is renunciation. That means revaluing the external life that we live and reframing it and understanding it to be divine. So we know that Judas betrays. And on the Wednesday, that's exactly what happens. And for some cultures, we call it Spy Wednesday. We're betraying, often betray. Betrayal means we go against the grain of truth. We betray our own truth. And then we begin the 3 significant days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, prior to Easter. So it begins on Thursday, also called Maundy Thursday, and this Thursday, a double celebration is there. Maundy Thursday is there, and also it happens to be Swami Yogananda's Tithi Puja as well. And on Thursday, we'll try to combine somehow these 2 subjects to make it meaningful. But on Thursday, we find several things significant. First of all, people want to prepare, can we eat somewhere? And will it be something like a Passover meal of some kind? And so they're looking for a place. Again, Jesus directs them, go to this person and he'll give you a room. And they find a room and they sit there. And this is the dramatic series of events that are to do with so much betrayal. One of you will betray me, 12 apostles. And one of them will betray. And Judas, of course, has already gone and sold Jesus for the 30 pieces of silver. And they say, who is it? Who is it among us? And he says, the one who dips his fingers in the same bowl as me, that is the one. So they're all suspicious. And even around this and before this, many, many events are there, worth studying. For example, James and John are debating. This kingdom is about to come. And can you tell me who will sit at your left hand, who will sit at your right hand among us? And then he berates them. And the sense of brotherliness he introduces into this Thursday. It was on this Thursday that he himself washes their feet. And Peter, of course, protests, I am not worthy for you to wash my feet. And Jesus says, well, in that case, have nothing to do with me. Oh, and then please wash me all over, says Peter. Now, Sister Nivedita was being served by Swami Vivekananda. And she again protested. She said, how can I allow you to serve me or wash my hands or anything like that? And he said, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. And she bit her tongue. She was almost about to say, but that was for the last time. And indeed it was. And so part of the liturgical celebration on this Thursday will be that priests, those who are priests and bishops and the Roman Catholic Pope himself will wash the feet of 12 selected people. This current Pope did it, I think, on his first year of being the pontiff. He washed the feet, much to a great deal of controversy, washed the feet of a Muslim boy. And so it is a real sign that the highest are the humblest. And that really we're in this life not just for a sense of effort and pursuit of our own freedom, but an intrinsic part of this is to see this God in everything and in everybody and worship, therefore, and serve. And washing the feet, what a beautiful gesture. It's an oriental gesture that you'll wash somebody's feet. Now, of course, recently we had the Holy Celebration, and some devotees came. And I thought of this event because they wanted to put powder on the feet of the Swamis. And my urge was, let me put powder on your feet also. But it wouldn't have been acceptable somehow. And I think and I was even thinking that on Thursday night, we have an event in normal times, of course, that is in post-COVID times, where people come and the monks wash the feet of the devotees. This will be horrific for many. And yet, look at what Jesus did. See how he washed the feet of his disciples. We had one here, I think once we had something like a Mother's Day, and the children were doing it toward their mothers. And it was a beautiful, beautiful celebration and festival, honoring the mothers. But in that way, every human is an embodiment of the divine. And look at what Jesus did. And then he has a supper. He shares the supper, so beautifully portrayed by Leonardo da Vinci. This Last Supper portrait is there, all at a table, in various postures, a meal of fellowship, which has come liturgically over the years, because Jesus said, eat my body, drink my blood, not just as a commemoration in many people's view, but also as a kind of intimate prasad. That is that all food, we may say, all food, if we think of it in a certain way, will be the matching inputs to our digestive food. That is, our digestive Lord, our Vaishvanara, the one who digests our food. Bhagavad Gita says, I digest your food. I myself digest your food. And that itself is worthy of consideration and meditation. Who digests your food? I often ask children, who digests your food? Whether it's a child or an adult, the inclination to say, I did it. I said, yes, but this I consciousness was not there for a year or so. Who digests your food then? And I then make fun. You see, you don't put food in this entrance here and then put a spoon down and give it a stir. That doesn't happen. Something is digesting your food, and the glory of the divine is exhibited in the capacity and the power to digest food in every creature. And it is the Lord of the universe that does it. It is to observe these things, these ordinary activities that we take for granted, that we grow in our spiritual appreciation and life, and grow in our thankfulness, and therefore grow in our purity. And so he washes their feet, he has the Last Supper, and he's able to understand one traitor is there. And on this day, liturgically, all the chrisms are blessed, but on this day, there's no real major celebration, because this is the time where we know what is about to happen. All the ornaments, that is all the sacred pictures in a church, crosses, etc., in many of the churches are covered with a purple cloth, purple, the color of mourning, and crosses taken away. Now we come, of course, to Good Friday. In Ireland, traditionally it has been that all the shops are closed, everything is closed, every avenue of entertainment is closed. And it is really a day of great mourning because it is the day that is celebrated, or at least commemorated, where Christ is tortured and hung on the cross. And this has become the object of intense meditation by many, many mystics. We were discussing here in the ashram the life of a great saint, well known in Ireland and throughout Europe, called Padre Pio, a Franciscan monk who got what is called the stigmata. His celebration of the Christian puja that we call Mass took something like 2-3 hours. When I first came to Ireland, I was told, if you want to go and have a good luck by a church, try to get in and out in 10 minutes. And don't go to a priest who will go beyond. So his Mass took 2 to 3 hours. And during that time, he must have meditated on the great pain of his chosen ideal, Jesus the Christ, the suffering, because the theology tells us the reason why he was doing this was, like every guru, to take the sins of the whole world, of whole mankind, on himself. Of course, the theological tracings goes back to the Jewish tradition, because don't forget, part of the Passover meal was an offering, a paschal lamb. And in the most ancient days, a lamb was offered as a religious sacrifice. And throughout the whole of history, in most cultures, you'll find this kind of yajna, this kind of sacrifice is there. It is said maybe even in the Vedic times, live animals were sacrificed as well. And we know that in certain cultures, human sacrifices were also there. Buddha himself offered himself as a sacrifice when he was in a mood to debate or be challenged. When somebody says, what about animal sacrifice? Isn't it a good thing? Then he would have said, well, if you want the best sacrifice and you consider me to be the best, why don't you offer me? Of course, they all declined. But the logic was impeccable. And so all the vicissitudes of a people and all the sins, all the desires and temptations of a people were put onto a lamb, a sacrificial lamb. It's where we get the expression scapegoat, and offered. Primitive as that was, we can, and Christianity does, align this with the human sacrifice of Jesus on a cross. And what does this symbolize in our practical philosophical terms? Somebody once drew it on the board for me, I think it was me myself, as you see, what is a cross? It is a stroke down, I crossed out. The elimination of ego is necessary before a great revelation takes place. When we remove that last obstacle of egoism, then this great revelation comes by itself. It is not meditation that gives us. It is not karma yoga that gives it, or bhakti that gives it. It is none of these processes that give this. They simply prepare the ground, they prepare the mind so that the revelation happens by itself. They clear away the clouds, they take away the obstacles until we see what is there by itself, unchanged. In the language of Katha Upanishad, this unborn, unchanging, whose consciousness is unflickering, once the entire body goes, that still remains. And it is there, giving its own life, lending its energy, lending its input, making things operate by its presence. And so we see in terrible detail, there are great films that detail the great horrendous torture, because Jesus is arrested. Jesus goes toward the Bethany side of things, 3 kilometers or so, and he goes to the Mount of Olives and he prays. And there we can see the human side of the Jesus. Sweating blood is the description. And when he comes and sees his apostles there who are sleeping, he says, "Could you not watch with me?" See? And then 3 times he does that, and nobody's watching him. Now, even preceding that, in Jerusalem, he would have had, of course, he would have made a big stirring. And those people who control the commerce and the religion of the day, don't forget, Jesus and any other incarnation is coming in order to adjust and make things harmonious, to create a dharma where there is adharma, create a harmony. And everyone will come where religion is in trouble. In other words, where the letter of the law is being applied by the superficial ritualistic dimension of religion is put uppermost and becomes corrupt. And it happened in those days too. So the various groups are there described in the Gospels: Pharisees, Sadducees, priests, all of these are there. And all of them have tremendous pride, but they have a different theology. The Pharisees believe in an afterlife, the Sadducees do not. And so various challenging questions are there. One of the trickiest questions: what do you think about the tax? Do you think that the tax that the Romans are imposing us, do you think that's what we should be doing? A very tricky question. When you get 2 things you should avoid, politics and religion, we are told. And they try to introduce politics now. So he said, "Give me a coin. Whose face do you see? Whose head do you see on the coin?" It says, "The emperor's head." "Then give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's." Such clever answers he gave, but you could see there was hostility from those who controlled the temple, controlled the religion, controlled the money, controlled the wealth, and controlled the ignorant, because in every religion, the dominance of the priests are there, and they control those who are ignorant and sit on their heads. And so Jesus combats them and brings a kind of element of logic and truth and balance. The Jewish Sabbath is so well controlled. On the Sabbath, which is a Saturday, on the Sabbath, you're not even allowed to enter into an elevator, a lift, and take you off the floor. This is considered work, and no hand should be raised on the Sabbath. And the central Passover Sabbath is Saturday coming. And it was this Saturday where the events after the crucifixion took place. We'll come to that now. So all along they were challenging him and trying to trap him. And each time he combated them with words of tremendous wisdom, and nobody could defeat him in that. So there was an increasing sense of resentment among the Jewish hierarchy. And we are told, therefore, they came to seek him out. They knew that he was inhabiting this Garden of Gethsemane, favorite place of his apostles, and he was led there by Judas the Iscariot. And there he was identified, and Jesus was arrested and taken. Peter followed him. And of course, he was tortured. He was mocked because Messiah means king, king of the Jews, a capital punishment for the Romans. And he was tried in Sanhedrin, but they couldn't find anything wrong. Of course, they weren't trying him for political things. They were trying to test him. You say you are this Messiah that we're all expecting, but you don't look like a royal king. You look like more a kind of friend of the poor and a rebel leader and that kind of thing, maybe. You're not looking like the king, King David, who comes. And all this is going to get us in trouble with the Romans. This is a paraphrase, basically, of how they were thinking. And so they give him a crown of thorns in mockery, put a purple sign of royalty, purple cloak on him, and then eventually give his own clothes and send him to the Romans for their trial. Now, the Romans is quite easy. Pontius Pilate is portrayed as an amiable person on Jesus' side, But I can assure you that is all due to subsequent politics past 70 AD, because there was a Jewish revolution then. And so when Christianity spread to the Greco-Roman world, you could not really be a Jew and be safe. And so the blame all went on to the Jewish people from the Greco-Roman Christians. But that aside, the sentence was passed very quickly, and Pontius Pilate would have had no compunction about that, despite the portrayal in the Gospels. I think most historians would agree he wasn't that kind of person. He was completely ruthless, and the Romans would have put this death penalty and this torture, these crosses, particularly if there was any smell of political revolution. They would have put these crosses on the outskirts of the city so that anybody visiting would be taught a lesson, something like the medieval put your enemy's head on a pike and put it on the city gates, that kind of thing. The torture of crucifixion, historians will tell us, was the most horrendous death you could imagine. It was a slow and painful death because you died of asphyxiation. You had to hold yourself up by your arms. And so essentially you died from drowning. But the point is that Jesus was put on a Friday there. On the third hour, we told, he gave up the ghost. He died. And when this was reported, it seems that they were surprised how he died so quickly. He was offered some wine on a sponge. He declined to be drugged with myrrh and so on and so forth, as many might have done. And because the Passover was the following day, the Saturday, there was an urgency. The urgency was that you can't really prepare a body adequately in the time. You had to take the body down quickly, store it somewhere, and then on the day after the Passover, you could now attend to it. And so it was this Joseph of Arimathea, apparently, who had a tomb that was prepared. And so they stored him in the tomb. It shows Jesus' influence. And it was a hollow in a rock. And we see archaeological evidences of such tombs. And a stone was rolled against the entrance. And the idea was you can leave it there temporarily. And then in the following day, on a Sunday, you can then come and then bathe it and attend to it and so on and so forth. And so from there, we know the events now. So Saturday, liturgically, I have to go back. Friday, liturgically, in a church, typically, the whole place is really in a somber mood because they're mourning Christ's death. What does it mean to us spiritually in a meditative way? We start off really reviewing our own doubts and fears and temptations, our own status quo. And we have to be remorseful for some of the things that we have done. And we make sure that we humbly attend to these and truthfully admit to the state of affairs of the human mind. And then with that truthfulness, we can then proceed. And so the Saturday, nothing really happens liturgically. But of course, the Passover is there on the Saturday. And for Christians, the only celebration is in the evening. And in the evening, all the churches are put in a state of darkness, and a fire is lit outside, along with prayers and so on. And one candle is lit. This is called the Paschal candle. And from there is lit many, many candles within the church. So the whole thing gets lit up. And it indicates, of course, in a wonderful symbolic way, how light is now brought out of this darkness, this mourning, this depression, this great uh, darkness, the dark night of the soul, we might call it. And out of this comes this light. So that by Saturday evening, there is a vigil. And the vigil lasts the whole day, because those people, devotees of Christ, would have been stood vigil. They would have expected his rising, because that was his promise. His promise was to bring a new kingdom. And he said, I will come again and I will resurrect. So there was that expectation there. They couldn't believe that this great Messiah, the whole movement is dead on his crucifixion. There has to be a sequel. And he himself promises this kingdom. And so therefore they're waiting and watching. And sure enough, on the Easter Sunday, they discover the rolled away stone before the tomb, and an empty tomb, and some accounts will say that some wondrous figure was there. I know who you're looking for. He's not here, he's gone. And many people got visions. Now we can understand the purport of this, because on Ramakrishna's demise, many people had visions of Ramakrishna too, with messages. After all, Swami Vivekananda was called across the seas with a vision that happened in Kanyakumari, at the very southern point of India itself. So we can understand this divine dimension and intervention. And it is this appearance, it is this life that occurs, despite the fact that the physical death has occurred. And it is this resurrection of spirit that occurs once the ego has gone and been dealt with. Once the complete ignorance is gone, it is all light, and it is all enlightenment, illumination. And that is really the new promise of the Easter Sunday, symbolized in many ways, symbolized by the ancient pagan traditions of eggs and so on, symbolizing life, and part and parcel of spring. And we find the connection then with the holy celebrations, with colors and paints and so on, and flowers. And so the whole thing comes together as a universal celebration of joy that makes it the most significant event in Christianity. There's a mistake among non-Christians that Christmas is the central event of Christianity. It is not. In fact, I think Christmas was not celebrated for maybe 1,000 years or so, but the Easter has always been there. It's symbolized as the sun's rising, so that the sacred day to Christians is a Sunday. It is not the Jewish Sabbath. And it's been like that since about the end of or middle of the 3rd century. And so this is a brief summary of the events of this week that is really material for us to meditate on and derive some benefit from, and to be in one, at least in spirit, with the sentiments of Christianity. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.